Good afternoon, everyone. This is Illinois WorkNet's Resume Tips in 30 Minutes, and this session is going to be on information technology. We have a couple of poll questions during the course of the session. If you have difficulties hearing us via your computer speakers, you are always welcome to dial into the phone number that is noted in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. If you have a question for our presenters, please type it into the chat pod that is in the middle at the bottom of your screen. And if you would like to print out the handout, it is in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Our agenda today is going to be talking a little bit about employer expectations, what we want to see on resumes from entry-level, from mid-career, or experienced job seekers. And then we're going to talk about building a resume, both entry-level and then mid-career or experienced people. Our presenters today include Trish Glees, who is the owner of TG Consultants, and you can see her website on the screen there, as well as Michelle Robin with Brand Your Career, and her website is there as well. So Trish, let's talk a little bit about this resume. This is actually a resume that you received, and tell me a little bit about this.
This resume was for a entry-level, or what we call a level 1 technician, so somebody looking to do to help provide help desk end user support. A little bit of the job description also include the ability to fix and repair actual hardware.
So as you were looking at this resume, you saw a computer technician that removed some viruses and did some assembly, and then you saw a computer assembler. And what struck you positively or negatively about this resume?
The positive things were that under the computer technician, he or she seemed to highlight things that I had in the job description. So talking about virus removal, that he had done this. He put them in a bulleted format, didn't make it very long paragraph. You know, he didn't explain how he did it or why he did it, which was really good. The computer assembler, that I think the person was trying to say, hey, I not only do software, but I also do hardware. The things that were on the other side of the scale would be there was inconsistent formatting across the board. There was spelling and grammar, and the job hopping. In the IT field, and especially today, jobs are really hard to come by, and to see that somebody is at a position under 6 months there's always a question of why.
All right, and that why can sometimes be maybe their work ethic, or it could be maybe they just didn't have the skills that they said that they had. So let's
Correct.
talk a little bit about that. The first bullet point on this page that says technically qualified jobs. What's the difference that you want to look for when you're seeing somebody that maybe is a career changer versus a recent graduate?
So when it comes to technically qualified jobs, it's one thing to say you've done it. It's another thing to actually have done it. So a career changer could be somebody who has been around computers but hasn't had any formal training on them. So they don't have certificates. They know how Microsoft in the Windows world works. They have an idea of how networking works because they've been around it. So a career changer is going to not have the technically qualified jobs unless they've actually done the hands-on portion. The same holds true for a recent grad, because a recent grad probably has only learned it in a book sense. Even if they've gone to a trade school, they've worked on it in a very controlled environment. So there's keywords that I always look for, that I love having the recent grad because they're still pliable and haven't picked up really any bad habits yet. To be honest with you, the career changer, it depends on why they're changing their career.
So what are some of the keywords that you do look for an entry-level person?
For an entry-level person, I'm going to look for when they're listing out their technical skills. They will generally do it under technical skills or knowledge that they have Windows. I want them to have relatively some kind of Windows experience, Linux experience, server experience that goes back at least 3 to 5 years. Putting on your resume that Windows 95 is not a good thing, because Windows 95 hasn't been around since 2000. Making it relevant. Showing that you putting down a bunch of acronyms doesn't necessarily know that you know what they mean. So putting a little bit of understanding. If you are a Cisco certified systems engineer, you actually write that out. You just don't put the letters there.
All right. That sounds like a good bit of advice there. Let's talk a little bit about formatting. And this is kind of important for all industries, not just information technology, but making sure that your formatting is consistent and that your spelling and grammar is excellent. One thing that most IT people are looking at, or people that are being hired for IT positions, is the fact that they can follow directions and pay attention to details. Would you agree with that statement?
I believe so. Yes. We're looking. It helps. It does help with, that you can follow a template, even if that makes sense. You can plug in information when needed.
Right. So making sure that your resume follows those directions and is paying attention to the details gives you a clue as to whether or not they might be able to do it on the job if you were to hire them.
Correct.
Let's move on to the next slide. And while we're doing that, let's pull out this poll question for the audience. What level of experience do you have for your current job search? And we're taking a look here at the audience, what they're answering. Quite a few people have experience. We're going to get into an experienced resume in just a couple of moments. All right. So let's go back to the presentation now. I'm going to hide this poll. So let's move to the next slide here, where we've got another entry-level resume. What did we see here? And you mentioned something about relevant technology when we were talking on the last slide.
Right. Once again, in this one, they were talking about Windows 95, Windows 98. They were mentioning that they had this older knowledge of older technology. Um, that's not going, I'm not going to be looking for somebody who knows Windows 95. I'm going to, if you told me you would not only have a knowledge but also certification in Windows 8 or Windows Server 2012, that's going to, that's going to be a little bit more relevant. Or let's say you put in, that DBase or FoxPro, which are both, or COBOL, which are both older programming languages that as we move forward, companies are looking to upgrade those to either MySQL or Microsoft SQL or Ruby on Rails. The fact that you know that and can read it, that's a great thing to know. That's, that's going to be somebody I'm going to take a deeper look at. And then, if you're picking a new career, tell why. In a very short, not because, my former employer, let me go. But why are you, is this a life change? Is this, a career change? Meaning that the career that you were in is no longer a valid career, such as, in the manufacturing world. And the one other thing is, to honestly report your skills, because if you make it to the interview portion, any good, whether it's myself or an IT manager, we'll know, because you won't be able to, we'll be asking questions, and you may not be able to articulate it, or you're going to articulate it in a way that you read it in theory but never put it into practice.
So let's talk about this last bullet point on the page, how you help to achieve a goal.
How you help achieve a goal. So if you see here in this one, he talked about what the company did and what he did for the company. One nice thing is, how did you help that company achieve X? For example, I helped write let's stay in the programmer world because it's a little bit easier. I helped write a program that saved the company $30,000. I helped implement new server technology by reusing older hardware, but putting in, reusing older chassis, but putting in new hardware such as motherboards, which those motherboards and CPUs change, but the memory doesn't sometimes. So how you recycled, you saved money. Everybody is always looking to save money or achieve something faster. And if you put down how you helped in a particular project, that's a great thing.
Great. Now, we've got a question from the audience, and I think Michelle might be able to answer this in a little bit when we get to the building a resume, but where would you include the why if it's a career change? In your summary at the top of your resume? Would you suggest that?
Yeah, I would think that would be at the top, at your summary. But, Michelle probably has a better answer. But I do want to just answer, Joe asked a question about, if you asked if you had mainframe, you definitely could put COBOL. Right. I didn't name all of the programming, but correct, if a mainframe, although not used widely today, there are still some manufacturers that use it. So putting down that you understand what a mainframe is that would be a valid skill set versus putting down Windows 95.
Right. All right, let's move on to an extensive experience. What are we looking at here on this resume?
Well, this one is a somebody who is looking for either a management or a senior leader technician role. They right at the top put down, that they have a senior technology executive, that they were, they helped leveraged companies. Here are their 5 bullet points of their strengths. Their career history really was around what they did in the technology world. They only had one job that was what I called non-computer, as opposed to, continuing on and adding all their retail. The education portion was right there. The one thing that I would have changed on this is that under education, this person then put down their certifications or their affiliations. I would have put a header to that. But that's just, that would have been mine for easy breakup.
Right, that makes sense, and I would have suggested that as well. So Michelle's answered Teresa in the chat pod, but she will be addressing this momentarily. So we covered starting with your strengths, making sure that what you're looking at is what the employer is going to want to look at, and does your career history support it, as well as does your education support it. Let's take one more look at this next resume, and this will kind of bleed us into the next segment as well. This particular resume earned a job seeker 2 job offers that both included a $20,000 a year promotion from each job. And this was somebody who was looking for that management position. One of the things that I noticed was it's going to make a difference whether you're working for a company like maybe, say, Motorola, where they've got IT, but they've got other things as well, versus working for a company like you, Trish, that does all sorts of things for companies, so that you're dealing strictly with IT stuff with your job, where an IT manager for a company might have a department of like 5 people. So let's talk a little bit about the differences between this and what you saw on your previous resume.
So on the previous resumes, they were definitely entry level. This resume here does have experience. This does have IT manager. This resume right at the top put what he or she wants to be, but most likely, without seeing this actual job description, put what the job description was. That he was applying for an IT manager's position, and then he went ahead and put down why he thought what was his experience, what was his thought process for putting down, why he thought he would be a good candidate for this. A lot of times people will read a job description, and I believe in pretty much every job description, they essentially always say, and Michelle can jump on this, but they generally always ask for some kind of oral, written communication skills. They're always asking for, customer service, or to be customer oriented, because IT is a service industry. And people will then say, well, I did 5 years of retail at XYZ retail store, therefore I should be a good fit for this. And, and they write that, but it has nothing to do with the job or with IT. This gentleman here put it all together and laid it out so that, you had your certifications up at the top. You knew exactly what his skill set was right away. Then he went into his professional experience and explained his way through what he did and why he did it and how he helped achieve a goal.
Those are all very good points that we like that we like to point out. Um, and we have a comment from the audience that says, I like how he used actual references in the box. And I actually have references on my resume as well, only I put mine at the end of my resume.
Right. That was
It's
the
just,
only thing that I saw was weird, if you will.
yeah, but it's apples and oranges. So
Right.
let's move on to building a resume. And we can talk about formatting now. So Cindy's also saying in the comments here, I see a lot of formatting in the resume. I've been told to stay away from the fancy formatting. Should I be adding that? Well, let's talk about that as we're going forward here. And we want Michelle to talk about some of the templates that we have available in the Illinois WorkNet Resume Builder. Um, Michelle is actually a professional resume writer and has a certification to that end, and she does a lot of that fancy formatting, but in some instances the fancy formatting doesn't translate well when you're uploading a resume. So Michelle, let's talk a little bit about what we've got going on with Illinois WorkNet Resume Builder and how our audience might be able to use that tool to their advantage.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. And just to answer Cindy's question about the formatting, yes, it's definitely better to stay simpler when you're applying online, like Dee said. Applicant tracking systems, or ATS as they're known, they like very simple formatting and very simple headings, summary, experience, education, etc. And I'll speak to more about that in just a minute. The templates in the Illinois WorkNet can probably be used for both, I like to say, for human eyes as well as the computer when you're applying online. And overall, this particular template for a novice resume, I really liked how it clearly defined the sections and had a format that was traditional but not exactly like everyone else's. At least, you know, there's a little line in there, so that's not going to trip up an ATS system if you're submitting it online. So the other thing about submitting resumes online, in this particular template, it's good that the name and address and phone number are each on a separate line. That's something else that you want to do when you make sure that you're submitting resumes online. Make sure all that contact information is on its own, each separate line. And you'll have a better chance of passing through the ATS system. So the other thing about this particular template for a recent grad or young professional, it has a nice summary section. And traditionally, you know, resumes in the, I would say, olden days had an objective statement at the top. And really, in today's marketplace, the employer is really only interested in what you can do for them, not what you want them to do for you. So what I mean by that is you really need to show what your value is and what your unique selling proposition is. So what do you do in that particular job that you're targeting that no one else can do? And that's applicable to either a recent grad or someone with more experience. So when you're writing your summary, think about those types of things.
So that's great. Those are great points. And let's talk a little bit about the difference in formatting here for a novice or entry-level job for their resume versus experienced.
Sure. One, I would say, main difference is where the education section goes on a resume. If you're a recent grad, or even if you have maybe 1 to 2 years experience, you may want to put your education up at the top. I would say that's probably likely 90% of the time. However, if you've had extensive internships or have made a lot of accomplishments in your first year or two on the job, then definitely lead with your experience section instead. And the templates, what I really liked about them is they allow you to flip around those sections very easily. So you can still use this format, and you can flip the education and the experience section, you know, around if you want. It's very easy to do in the tool.
That's one of the great tools about this resume builder that we have for Illinois WorkNet. There's also the section here for the coursework, so if they don't have the actual experience, they can see what kind of courses they were able to take during during their certifications. So let's cover some bullet points here about building that entry-level resume. We want to
Okay,
have
so, I'm sorry, Dee, what did you say?
Let's talk about these bullet points. You want to expound upon, just to reiterate these points.
Yeah, so again, with the summary, you really want it to be about what you can do for the employer and show your value. And then in a recent grad resume, education, 90% of the time is going to be up at the top. In addition, you want to highlight your technical skills, similar to what Trish was pointing out, that listing of skills and spelling out the acronyms. I would actually recommend spelling out and putting the acronyms because that helps with keywords. And we'll talk more about that in just a minute. In addition, one thing on that template that it didn't have is I always like to include a very brief description of the company that I worked for, or the candidate worked for in my resumes. So it can be very brief. It could be, leading company in the healthcare industry or whatever industry that particular company is. Maybe you want to say revenue size if you can, employee size, just so a hiring manager has an idea about the size of the company that you worked for.
One of the great points on the Illinois WorkNet Resume Builder is you can add a link to a company, as well as you can add text into a text field to add that information that Michelle was just talking about what that company does. So let's go on to our next slide here about building a mid-career or an experienced resume. There's not a whole lot of difference between building either or of those, but Michelle, would you like to talk about building one of these?
Sure. Also, one thing I neglected to mention before is before you build any resume, make sure you really have in mind your target position and even the type of target company you have, because once you have that in mind, it's much easier to focus on what those elements in your resume that are going to resonate with that target employer are. So I would recommend kind of just drafting an outline of companies that you want to target as well, so you can keep that in mind when you're drafting your resume. So with more experienced professionals, instead of titling that top section of your resume, summary or executive profile, you can actually title it with your target job position. Like we saw in that Jim Job Seeker resume, it said IT manager. This particular resume says systems analyst, and that can be followed by your summary. And in your summary section, you can even include testimonials from LinkedIn or from a review, just to add some substance and have some quotes about, it's not just you touting what you've done, it's other people saying good things about you. So that's always kind of nice to add in. If you don't feel comfortable with, I never was a system analyst, how can I possibly put that at the top of my resume? So if that makes you feel uncomfortable, one way to do it is to just add the word target in front of it. So target : system analyst, and the hiring manager will know right away what you are getting after. And one thing about this particular template for the experienced people is it really had two ways of presenting the skills and expertise. So there's an area of expertise, and then they go into details about all the different programming languages that they know, and the hardware and the software and the networking technologies. So that was a kind of a nice balance between those two things.
That's great. Let's talk about some of the key points here, just to reiterate with everybody.
Sure. I already talked about the first two pretty extensively. So the other thing that I was going to mention was about your achievements. Similar to what Trish said, make sure that you're talking about your achievements in your resume. So things that you have accomplished, things that you got a pat on the back from your manager, things that you were awarded at your work or in school are important to highlight. And when doing those achievements, it's important to front load those bullets. And what I mean by that is put the result first. So increased productivity 30% by doing such and such. That's what I mean by front loading. And then if you have an extensive career You don't need to include more than 10 to 15 years of experience. And that sample we just looked at had a nice little line of early career included, and they listed a couple of different positions that they had. So if you have relevant positions that you did, 17, 20 years ago, you can still include that, but I would not include the years. You can just include it in a small little line.
Great. So now let's find out from the audience. Is your resume getting you the response you want? Sometimes. One of the things, Michelle, do you want to address keywords, and I'll move over this this link that you
Sure.
had from your website?
Sure. We've kind of touched on it in little ways. Keywords really help your resume get through that applicant tracking system. And so the way to find keywords is, first of all, obviously look in the job description, especially if they say requirements include, and they list, 3, 4 bullets. Make sure that you're kind of listing some of that language and putting it into your resume. Because when the recruiter is searching on their ATS system, they're most likely going to put in some of those same phrases. One way to also look for keywords is to take the job description and paste it into a word cloud software like Wordle, which is WORDLE.net. That's software that will make a word cloud, and there's a link. I have a blog entry about keywords and how to find them and how to incorporate them into your resume. And where to incorporate them. So you don't always have to make a list of skills. You can incorporate, your skills and what your achievement was related to that skill throughout your resume.
Okay, so now I've got another poll question here for the audience. Do you include a cover letter with your resume submittal? Oh, it looks like our audience is doing pretty good here. So while they're answering that, Michelle, do you want to cover some cover letters?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that just about everyone said yes, either always or sometimes. If you ask 10 recruiters if they read cover letters, you'll get 50% that say they do and 50% that say they don't. So in my opinion, it doesn't hurt you to have the cover letter. It can only help. So here's some quick tips on cover letters. Make sure they're a great place to speak to things that are not in your resume and show a little bit more of your personality. If you're that career changer, a cover letter is a perfect spot to stating why you want to do a career change and what relevant skills you have that are transferable to that new career. But it's important in your cover letter to have an opening that grabs attention, be brief, and give the reader a reason to want to look at the attached resume. So state some additional accomplishments that maybe aren't in your resume or highlights of your career. And then at the end, have a call to action. So don't conclude with, I hope to hear from you soon type statement. Instead, state how your skills can benefit the company and you would like to have an opportunity to discuss that further and find out more about their needs. So be a little bit more forward in asking for that interview.
That's great. So we had 2 questions from the audience that we need to make sure that we answer. Where would you include the why that Trish referenced if the person is in a career change?
If I can jump in there, if you're in a career change, the best place to do that is on that cover letter, because that gives you the space to do you can do text. You can actually write like a paragraph. And then on your resume, just, put a 1 or 2 line, a sentence about, the career change, what's leading you to, to coming into the IT field or any field, particularly if it's a completely different field.
Do you agree with that, Michelle?
Yeah, definitely the cover letter is a good place to include a career change and why you're changing.
Great. And then Cindy asked, do they search on the cover letter as well for keywords, or should the resume be the only place that the keywords are really exemplified?
It probably depends on the system that you're submitting. There's a gazillion ATS systems out there, but you can. I've had candidates paste their cover letter in front of their resume on the one document, so it's in there. So yes, those keywords will get searched as well. It certainly doesn't hurt to incorporate some of those keywords into your cover letter. Definitely, especially if the job ad answers or talks about a specific thing and you want to restate that cover letter, it's perfectly fine to do that in too.
Great. Well, thank you very much to both of our presenters today, Michelle Robin of Brand Your Career and Trish Glees of TG Consultants. This was an IT resume tips in 30 minutes, and we almost did it. We got 35 minutes. But thank you very much, ladies. Look for our next sessions. We've got one coming up on healthcare in just a little bit, and we've got one coming up on manufacturing next Wednesday. We will also be doing a webinar on our resume building tool at 2:30 next Wednesday. And Chelsea, if you would please put the Eventbrite link into the chat pod, then we can let everybody register for those that had not already registered. Thanks very much, and watch for the recording coming up on our website as well as our YouTube channels. Everybody have a great day.